Hello, noobs. Let's become hackers. This episode, we're gonna be learning bools, or booleans. We're gonna learn if, which are conditionals, and loops that let us do things over and over again without having to type it all out. So, let's create our script in service script service. And we have hello world, right? Well, this time we're going to be learning what booleans are. So booleans can either be true or they can be false. Basically on or off. These are super useful for conditions and our loops. So that's why I added these together. So first we need to know what these are. So if we try printing this, you can see it prints true and false. It's almost like you're printing a string, but you don't have the quotes. But basically, with our booleans, these let us do conditional checking. You can see how it's like yellow, kind of like if we had blah. I mean, this is more bold. You can kind of tell the difference, but this is a string that we learned last time, but this is a boolean. Okay, so let's try to learn if. So kind of like with our functions, we have a scope. So let's say we had a variable. We can call it blah. We set this to our boolean value. So now if we check if blah. So if you look and see that we have, let's try making a function real quick. So kind of like how we have our parentheses here. This is telling us that was after the parentheses. This is in the scope. And we have then, after this is our scope here for the conditional check. And when we do if, it's going to try to see if whatever here is true. And if it is, then we're going to go into the scope. So, knowing that, if we change blah to false, whatever happens in here isn't going to happen because I told it not to. We're basically turning this off. So if we do print in here, we say hi. Hello. Okay, so if I press play after getting rid of these, we don't get anything in output. Why is that? Because we basically turned this off because this is false. But once I turn this to true, we see hi. So that basically lets us turn on and off different portions of our code, depending on if this is met, this condition is met. Now you can also chain these together. So let's say I put and. So the other words you'll have for conditional checks is and, or, I think that, I'm not sure if there's XOR, I guess there's not. But you'll have and, or. So with and, it will let you say I have this true, okay? Since blah is true and this is true, then it will go into this scope. But if I set blah, since this is true, I'll make this easier. So we have if true and true. This will go through because both of them are true. But if I change this to false, then this is going to turn this whole thing like false. It's not going to get into here. Both of these have to be true with an and to go ahead into the scope. So if I have false and false, this won't get through. If I have false and true, it won't get through. But once I have true and true, it is true and true. It'll go into the scope. Now, inversely, if you have or, this will actually still go in. It will still jump into here. It'll go into scope. And if you have false here, true or false, it will go through. So true or true, it will go through. I'll also show you something else. If we go like this, where we have two minuses and we have two brackets, like open brackets, and two end like closed brackets, and when you press enter here, we can have like multi-lines of comments, which is super useful. So let's make a little chart. So if we have true and true, this is basically, I'll put true as is it's going to let us go through. Okay. And then false will say that we're not going to go into scope. So this is, we'll say true scope. If we have true and false, this is a false scope. It's not going to get in. If we have false and false, or it's not going to go. If we have true or true, this will go through. If we have true or false, it'll go through. If you have false or true, it'll go through. But if we have false or false, it's not going to go through. So it's going to go through for pretty much everything except for if they're both false. So it's kind of like the inverse of having true and true at the and. But with or, you can have a false in there and it still goes through. So yeah, you just have and or to chaining. So now let's get rid of this for a second. We don't need the function stuff anymore. So let's say we also want to check like numbers. So we can do like if 2 is greater than 3, there's a possibility of using this, or greater than equals, or less than equals, equals. There's also like less than, but yeah, so these are different ways you can check for numbers. So if 2 is greater than 3, which is, it's not, so this is basically going to be false. So if false, it's not going to go into scope, so it won't be able to print this. But once we have 2 is less than 3, it will go through. It'll go through into the scope. If we have less than or equal to, we can have 3, or we can have less than that, and it will go through into the scope. And it's kind of the same with the other ones. And if you have equals, it has to be the exact same. Like this would have to be 3, 3, or if I have this 2, it have to be 2, 2. But you can also chain these. So since this is 2 is equal to 2, this is basically true. 2 and 2 is greater than 3, which this is false. So if I say this is true and false, it's not going to go into scope. If I have 3 and is greater than 2, now this is true. So this is true and this is true. So it'll go into scope. Okay. So now that we understand conditionals, we can try loops. So let's try a while loop. So we can do while. Kind of think of this as you did functions, where you also have do. Oh, let's ignore that. If we have while true, do, end. So it's kind of like with our functions, where we have function blah. It's kind of like after our do, or it's probably like our conditionals more, where we have some other word. So if we have, it's basically like our then. So this announces our starting a scope. This will actually always, it would basically get stuck in here, because once we get here, it will keep doing whatever is inside of here forever and ever, and it won't be able to get into here. Like, it won't be able to do any code after this. Like, if we had a print here, then we just won't get here. If I try this now, let's see if it'll break. Yeah, we'll just get stuck hanging here. It might give us a warning, but yeah, I probably can't even close Studio. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so it'll script timeout and give you this warning here that it's always true. So we gotta make sure we avoid this, or at least tell it to do what's called a break. So once it gets down to here, it'll break. A good way to do this is, say we have our blah here. Let's call this actually increment. Increment basically means it'll increase. But let's start it at 1. Let's go increment. So if we have a conditional here, so if we do if increment is less than 5, then, or actually let's do equals. So once it reaches 5, then we'll break. We'll put this in here. And we'll do increment is equal to increment plus 1. So if I play this, it will basically just go through, because I didn't see how now it prints out, the while loop ended. So that is because we incremented until it reached 5, and then we broke out of this loop. So we told it to reach the end, and then we went on. So I can also try printing our increment just to make it more visible. And it actually only printed 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's because we started at 1, and before we even printed it out, we incremented the number. We added 1. So now this is 2. Then when it reached here, increment is already 2, so it's going to print out 2. If we want to have it print out before, we're going to have to put the print before here. So now it will print out 1, 2, 3, 4. And it doesn't print out 5 because we break at 5. So once this is 4, we increase increment by 1. So now it's 5. And now, since this is 5, we break out. And we're not going to do the loop again because it's already broken out. So it won't get back to here to print 5. If we wanted to print 5, we would just change this to greater than. So now it prints 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now that we know how to do incrementing with a loop, we can do this a lot easier by doing a for loop. And to do that, actually, I'll explain this real quick. So this is basically like our conditional, like what we were doing with if, like this stuff here. So whatever we have, like we could have increment here. While increment is greater than 5, you can actually change this to less than, since increment is starting at 1, right? So increment is starting at 1. Since 1 is less than 5, we go into scope, and then we print our increment, so it's 1, and then we increase 1, and then we go back, check to see if increment, which is 2, is less than 5. Oh, whoops. So now increment 2 less than 5, that's true, so that'll keep going, and then it'll increment again and again and again until it reaches 5. And then since 5 is not less than 5, this will be false. So kind of like with our if condition, it just won't go into scope. So it's basically breaking out without us having to call break. And then it'll print that. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It won't print 5. Then it'll print that. Ah. Okay. So now we can also learn a little trick. So instead of having to type increment like this, we can actually just type plus equals. Plus equals 1. This will increment without us having to type increment again. In other languages, you can also do like increment plus plus, but with Lua, it doesn't work. So just do plus equals 1. You could also just have a different number and it'll increase by that many times, by that number every single time. There's also minus equals. So if we do plus equals, it'll basically do the same thing. So now let's learn for loops. So with for loops, we basically set our increment like we were doing here, right in the same line. So we can do for I is equal to 1, and then we just tell it how far we want it to go. So since I starts at 1, it'll keep going and incrementing until it reaches 5. If we want to, we can also put another comma here, and we can put the number we want it to increase by. So I'm going to do 2 like that, and then it'll start at 1, and then it'll increase by 2. Check to see if it's 5. If it's less than 5, it will go into scope. So let's just try printing I. We're printing our increment. So let's get rid of these. Okay, so let's try printing this. See how it goes, 1, 3, 5. That's because we have, starting at 1, increments by 2, so now it's 3. Checks to see if it's 5, and 3 is less than 5, so it will print. But yeah, it goes through this first once before it increments. Just remember that. So that's why it prints 1, and then it prints 3, and then it does it again, and since it's 3 plus 2 is 5, it reaches, so it's kind of like once it reaches this number, it will still print 5. So if I is 5, then it's included in there. It's like a if it's less than or equal to, it's this one. It's like saying I is less than or equal to 5. Yeah. And you can also do it the opposite way. So say I want to start at 5. I want to decrement by 2, or just basically decrease until it reaches 0. Now if I print this, now it's going opposite. So I got 5, subtracts 2, now it's 3, it subtracts 2, now it's 1, subtracts 2, now it's -1, and then it breaks because it's less than 0. But yeah, that's your booleans, your if conditionals, and loops. You are now a hacker. Congratulations.